Is being a slumlord the only way to make money as a residential real estate investor, or is there a better way?
Oh!
Man,
This floor is just torched.
you're going to be faced with this dilemma every time a tenant moves out. And owning 150 doors means I'm face to face with it often. And in fact, today I went out to look at 5 different rental turnovers. And if I'm the one inspecting them, that means something went bad. Now, have you ever heard of the 1% rule? What about the 70% rule or the 60% rule? Does it really even matter when a tenant leaves your place looking like this or this? When I started acquiring rental properties, I thought I had it made because I was renting these things out for around $1,700 a piece, and the mortgage was only costing me $1,200. That's $200 a month, baby. That's cash flow. And so what do? You just add more of them. So I added 5 on just like that. That's $1,000 a month, $200 per door. And that was great until I had a tenant move out that left one of my places looking like this one. And at the time I was smart enough to put aside money for insurance and taxes because they kind of make you do that in the mortgage payment itself. But what I wasn't putting aside money for was maintenance. Every time something goes wrong with the property, well, who do you think pays for that? It's not the tenant, it's you. And what about CapEx, capital expenditures? Like if your HVAC goes out and you have to spend $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, or your roof needs replaced and you need to spend another $10,000. What if some other big repair happens like that and you haven't put aside money for it? That's why you always put aside 10%, depending on where you're at, for taxes and insurance. You always put aside around 7% for maintenance, depending on what class of property you have. Some require a little bit more maintenance than others, depends on the age of the property. CapEx, I put aside another 8% because one day that roof is going to go out. The HVAC is going to go out. What about vacancy? The place is not full all the time. And if you have to do a mini turnover renovation after a tenant moves out, obviously there's going to be time lapse in between when they move out and the next person moves in. You want to leave around 7% for vacancy. That's 1 out of every 12 months, right? 1 divided by 12. Well, that's 8%. We're going 7. So at the time, I thought I had all that figured out because I could go figure out how to do the work myself. I could save myself a lot of money by doing my own maintenance, my own CapEx. I could even pre-plan for the next tenant to move in. I'd find out if they were moving out, get new tenants lined up before they even moved out. At least the best that I could do until I had to move out of the city. And then of course I can't manage the properties myself. So obviously it's going to cost more to maintain the property if I'm not doing the work myself. But not only that, I actually had to hire a property management company to come in. And that's another 8 to 10% depending on who you hire and what their fee structure is. And don't forget, they're also going to charge you to put tenants in there. Generally, they'll charge a half a month to maybe a full month of rent just to put a tenant into place. Now, certainly you could DIY all of that stuff, but if you're wanting to grow as an investor, you really want to hire that out to be managed so you can go focus on other things in your business, like finding deals and managing the projects, the construction projects that are going on. But anyway, all of those things add up to around 40%, and that's where the 60% rule comes into play. So I'm getting $2,000 a month. And I'm going to take 60% of that, which is $1,200 a month. I want my mortgage to be no more than $1,200 a month. But you remember, I was making $1,700 a month. And I was thinking after principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, basically my mortgage payment of $1,500 a month, that I was making $200 a month. However, after we figured in all this other stuff, well, I figured out that I was actually losing around $200, maybe $300 a month. That is no good. Now you're probably thinking, gosh, I have to do this math on every single deal. Well, yeah, you probably should, but investors have figured out an easier way around this so you can quickly assess whether you have a deal on your hands or not. And that's the 1% rule. I'm sure you've heard about it before, and it's some super simple math. Let me show you. So I have this house for $200,000. That's what I'm going to purchase it for. And I just need to make sure that it rents for 1% of that number every month. So it's $200,000 house, 1% of $200,000 is $2,000. If it's renting for $2,000 a month, I know I have a good deal on my hands, because that 1% rule basically accounts for the 60% rule that we just talked about. You see what I'm saying? Now, it's not perfect. The 1% rule really came around when interest rates were a little bit lower, so it made a little bit more perfect sense. I don't want to get into the details here. That's not what this is about. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that you have to make sure that you account for all the costs that you're going to have as a real estate investor. Now, you're probably asking, how the heck am I going to get a deal that makes that work? Because what I'm seeing out there on the MLS does not get me 1% of the purchase price for my rents. And that's where the 70% rule comes in. I know. It's crazy. You got to remember all these percentages. Not really. There's only really 3 rules. Main ones are the 1% rule and the 70% rule, which is a flipper rule. However, it applies, and let me show you. The 70% rule basically says that to have a good deal on your hands, you need to be able to buy the house for 70% of the ARV. So if the ARV of a house is $300,000. ARV means the after repair value. That's what the house is going to be worth after it's fixed up. You need to buy for 70% of that. So 70% of $300,000 is going to be $210,000 minus the rehab costs. What it costs you to get that house to the $300,000 evaluation. So let's just say that the rehab costs, you have to do new paint, new floors, you have to put in some new appliances, maybe some new countertops, maybe some new cabinets. Maybe you have to do a little bit of HVAC work, a little bit of electrical work, whatever. It's a normal renovation, and it's going to cost you $50,000. That means that you should be buying this house for $160,000. Now, in this case, you have $210,000 in the deal. So you got your $210,000 in the deal, and you want to rent that for 1%. So in this scenario, you would be renting for $2,100 a month, which would cover all of your costs. Because remember, 60% of the $2,100 is $1,260 a month. So your principal and interest payment should be $1,260 a month, because you're figuring in taxes, insurance, property management, vacancy, maintenance, and capital expenditures. Don't make the same dumb mistakes I did. Make sure you count all your costs up. And I hear you out there. Where am I ever going to find a deal like this? Well, that's why I believe that every real estate investor also owns a construction company, basically, because you have to buy houses that are undervalued, and they're undervalued because they need work, and you know how to do the work to make them increase in value. That's called forced appreciation, sweat equity. That's what this channel is all about. Wealth isn't going to be given to you. You're going to have to go build it yourself. Now, for this particular rental, I go and get a bid to do the work that's needed, and it comes back at $8,500. That's way more than I accounted for on this routine turnover, even using the 1% rule. But I have to make it nice, right? Because otherwise, I would just be a slumlord. Maybe. I think most people have it all wrong, what it means to be a slumlord. Because, guys, I have seen houses that have been owned by slumlords. I've even bought them and had to do immense amounts of work to bring them up to living standards. So I take this bid and I send a text to my property manager. And I ask her, hey, if I put in new LVP, new paint, and do these couple more upgrades, what am I looking at in rent? Currently, we were getting about $1,067 in rent. So if I go do this necessary upgrade, how much more am I going to be getting in rent? She responds, well, Section 8 is paying $1,067, so you're going to get $1,067. Yeah, that's right. I go spend $8,500 on a remodel, and I'm going to get the same amount of rent. And this, guys, is where you need to understand the concept of the baseline, as I call it. Now, you probably all know that you run comps to see what a house is going to sell for after you renovate it. You know, if you make it really nice, all the other houses in the neighborhood have sold for $300,000. So I know that if I do all this work, this house is going to be worth around $300,000. But the same applies for rentals. I know that no matter what I do to that property, I'm not getting more than $1,067 a month. So why would I do any more than the baseline. Now, to further define what I mean by the baseline is just like you do comps for the sale, you also do comps for your renovation. You look at what other things in that neighborhood that are renting or selling, what finishes they have. Have they done Formica countertops, or do they have butcher block, or do they have granite? Do they have LVP floors, or do they have carpet? Do they have hardwoods? What about the showers and the bathtubs? Do they have tile, or do they just have the one-piece inserts? The light fixtures, are they upgraded? Are they all the same hardware? Are they black matte? Are they stainless steel? Are they chrome? Are they an array of old crap? Well, I'm going to take the minimum finishes, the baseline finishes, and that's what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to put $1 into the property that I'm not going to get $2 back in return. So if I go and do an $8,500 remodel on this place and it doesn't increase my rent by $1 single, why would I do it? This is the biggest problem that real estate investors have, that they look at every property through the same lens that they look at their own home. And the thing is, it's not your own home. It's a rental property. That doesn't mean you leave a disgusting mess or roaches running around or disgusting smells. That's why they make ozone machines. You can get smells out pretty easily with those things. Check it out. What it means is there's varying levels of finishes depending on what neighborhood, depending on what bracket of rental rates or sales rates in the neighborhood that you're in. So if you're living in an A-class neighborhood where they might rent for $3,500 or the houses might sell for $500,000, well, you're not going to do the same finishes that you're going to do in a place that's getting Section 8 rent. That wouldn't make any sense. But here's the problem with this particular property is as I was looking around trying to create this scope of work, I see these brown stains on the wall. I even see a little bit of the popcorn ceiling starting to flake off. And from experience, I know that what that means is there's some kind of moisture getting in. When popcorn starts flaking off, it's generally not just because it's old. And brown stains, pretty obvious sign that water's coming in. But there's a second story above this. And so I go upstairs, see what's going on up there. Sure enough, there's a tub. Now there's two important takeaways here. For one, the contractor who gave me a bid did not call that out. He would have put paint over these problems. Ooh, look at that. Didn't even notice that, but you can see that the floor dips just a little bit in that corner. There's certainly water coming from that tub. No doubt. No doubt in my mind. And I wouldn't have known about him until something much worse happened down the road. But two, and the bigger problem is, well, to help you understand this, my buddy Brad, he lives back in St. Louis, and he goes out of town a lot for work. And so his wife was home with their two boys, and they had a pool off their back deck, like one of those little ones that you buy from Costco. But I mean, they take hundreds of gallons of water, and they would fill this pool up, put it on their back deck. I know it was a strong back deck, so no big deal there. But anyway, he's talking to his wife on the phone. She needs to drain the pool, and he's walking her through the steps on how to siphon it down the hill behind their house, and she's kind of like halfway listening to him. And sure enough, he comes home. He's not thinking anything of it, and he goes to push his front door open, and it's like sticky. And then he walks into the house, and he notices that there's cracks all over the drywall in the house, and all the doors are kind of like not opening right. You can see that they're not level anymore. The cabinet doors were actually open because they wouldn't stay shut anymore because literally the house had shifted. So he goes to his wife and he's like, hey, when I told you how to siphon the pool, did you just pull the plug? And sure enough, yeah, that's what she did. She pulled the plug. Hundreds of gallons of water hit that house, behind the house, all at the same time. And the house sank inches immediately. All right. Now, usually you don't get hundreds of gallons of water hitting your house at the same time. What happens is slowly over time, a gallon at a time, a rain comes, or maybe there's a leak in the pipe that comes, and it's slowly deteriorating your property, and you probably don't even know it's happening. So in this scenario, he puts paint over these brown stains. Water is getting inside of my walls. Water is getting into the ground underneath the property, and it's deteriorating the structure, but I don't even know what's happening. So I guess you could say Brad was lucky. But anyway, there's 4 real things you're looking for. There's water from the outside, This is rain that gets into your roof, rain that gets into the siding, maybe around the windows because they're not built correctly. That's why you have gutter systems that take the water off your roof and get them away from your property. That's why you have eaves that block the rain from hitting the siding. Even though siding is supposed to keep water out, you still want to keep water off of the siding and off of the windows because water always finds its way in. 2 is water from the ground. If you have negative drainage coming towards your property, ultimately water is hitting it. And if it has nowhere to get around the property, it's going through the property. That means it's hitting your foundation all day, every day when it rains. And ultimately it's going to make that foundation sink. 3 is water from inside your property, which is what we were dealing with on this particular property. There was a leak in the tub drain, maybe the tub faucet. We haven't actually opened up the walls yet to figure out what's going on. But water from the inside of the house is getting in, is actually going down the wall in the upstairs, getting into the floor system. And once water finds its way into the floor system, it will kind of travel all over the place and ruin the drywall, maybe get into the walls on the exterior, and then start to deteriorate the actual wood inside of the walls. And once again, by the time you actually see the signs of this happening, it may have done a lot of damage, thousands of dollars worth of damage. And if we go back to the 60% rule, well, you're not really accounting for a multiple $1,000 structural repair. And number 4 is wood destroying insects or pests. I'm going to stop for a second because there's a train coming. These issues that are letting your property deteriorate, I always refer to as bleeding. You're letting your property bleed. Now, basically, this is what I'm saying, is you can't trust anybody else but you to be looking at these meta issues on your property. Things that are making your property deteriorate every day, making your property deteriorate and the value of that property deteriorate. If you don't handle these issues, if you don't look for them and address them, you're just a bad investor. Good investors want the value of their assets to be constantly appreciating, rising in value. But here's the thing. Letting your property deteriorate in value because of these structural issues still doesn't make you a slumlord. So not upgrading your property doesn't make you a slumlord. Letting your property deteriorate in value doesn't necessarily make you a slumlord. It can. I'll tell you about that here in a second. So what does make you a slumlord? Now, one year I was having a Christmas party for our whole company. They were bringing their family, their kids. I was bringing my family, my kids, and we actually had it in our warehouse type of office. And I spent a lot of time making sure that everything was taken care of, that there was no dangers because I knew there'd be these little kids around. Obviously, you don't want that type of liability. And anyway, I'm making my rounds. So my wife is kind of watching the kids. I'm making my rounds, introducing myself to people's spouses, to their kids, and all that kind of stuff. But one of my daughters was right next to me, and I heard her kind of like out of the corner of my ear saying, "What's this, Dad?" But I was focused on introducing myself to people's families, so their families knew that they had a great place to work and so on and so forth. But some kind of dad instinct, I just saw her reaching for something out of the corner of my eye, and I just happened to grab her hand right before she grabbed 2 bare feed wires to an electrical panel. I had totally forgotten that they were there because I've just seen that electrical panel every day for so many days in a row. I didn't even think about it when we were wrapping everything up before the party. And I'm really not sure what would have happened if she would have actually grabbed those wires. But I mean, it like wrecked my night. I could not focus. It still kind of makes me sick to think about what could have happened. But the point is, that is a safety and liability issue. And failing to take care of those things, whether it's by accident like I did, or if it's on purpose, well, that's what makes you a slumlord. And this is a part of a scope of work that cannot be overlooked. Not only does it make you a crappy person, or in my case, dad of the year, it also opens you up for some serious liability. This is how people get sued and get everything taken. So these are items that you do not want to overlook. And I'm going to give you a list of them. This list is not all encompassing, but it will get you started. Fire alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. Broken glass, just like we're dealing with at this property. Egress. That means that if you have a bedroom, there is a window or an exit doorway where people can get out in the case of a fire or some kind of carbon monoxide or any type of danger. And it doesn't only mean that they can get out, it means that a fireman can get in to get your kid out of the house or to get you out of the house. And there are specific rules on the size of these windows or doors to make sure that they're sufficient for a rescue mission. Rails and stairs, another issue that we're dealing with on this property. I have no more than a 4-inch gap here, so babies can't fall off of there. And those spindles can't be further than 4 inches apart. The rule is that if you can fit a 4-inch ball through it, they're not close enough. You need to make sure that rails are on the staircases. Electrical issues, like the one I was just telling you about, or others that we found on this property. Locks, both on the doors and on the windows, making sure that intruders can't get in and out of the property. Also making sure that the locks don't lock by a key on the inside.
There's fire hazard there.
I.e., if there's a fire and they need to get out, they can turn the deadbolt, not have to go find a key to turn the deadbolt. EPA issues like mold, asbestos, lead, proper ventilation of carbon monoxide type of things like the flue in your water heater, making sure that basic mechanical, electrical, plumbing meets code. And then finally, to come full circle to the bleeding, any structural issues. So bleeding can cause structural issues. In fact, it will lead to structural issues. And once those structural issues are in play, that is now a safety concern that needs addressed. That's why it's so important. Going back to the previous step, make sure you're always looking for these bleeding issues and you repair them before they become a safety and liability concern. Now, guys, this sucks. These can be really expensive fixes, the safety and liability type. But here's the reality. Not only in real estate investing, but being a good person is often a difficult path. But man, when people are living in your house, it's really the only choice. So I think I made it pretty clear what it means to be a slumlord. So what did a smart investor do on this turnover? I say smart investor, it's like a term. I'm not actually smart. I am an investor though. So number one, deal with safety and liability. It is a non-negotiable. It happens on every single renovation, every single turnover, every time you walk through a property, you got to make sure those things are taken care of. Do it or be a slumlord. Number two is stop the bleeding. Make sure that your property is not deteriorating in value. It's not a necessity, but if you don't do this, you're just a dumb investor. Three is achieve the baseline. This is optimizing your investment, getting the most money out versus the money that you've put in. Don't over renovate. If you over renovate, you don't get that money back. You need to save all the money you can. You need to have all the wins that you can because guys, you are gonna have some losses. You're gonna have an $8,500 project that you did not account for. So every win that you can get, put that money in the bank. Don't go spend it because problems are coming. All right, now that got a little bit heavy. I hope that doesn't deter you from becoming an investor because the reality is it does not matter what business you choose. There are going to be struggles. It is not easy to grow your own business, whether it's in real estate or somewhere else. Now, there is the alternate option that you could just continue to work for somebody else and build their future, but I don't like that one. Why give the best hours of the best years of my life building somebody else's future? I'm going to build my own. And here's the thing with real estate. Yes, it's tough. Yes, there are certainly some headaches, but real estate has been making people wealthy for literally thousands of years. So here's the deal. I am choosing the path that I know works without a doubt. And the thing is, I've already been through it. I've already created the blueprint that works, and that's what I make these videos about. I want to make sure that you know that you can get wealthy off of real estate. All you got to do is take the steps, and I spend a lot of time laying out exactly what these steps are. So go check out one of these other videos so you can start gaining some knowledge. And knowledge times experience equals skills. And once you guys have skills, you're already wealthy. It's just a matter of following the blueprint at that point.
Jeez. It's not supposed to sound like that. That's good though. I mean, if you don't want people to know what you're doing in the bathroom. Oh. Oh. Hey. You see that? I fixed it.